Дойче Думков, ты еще увидишь, как из-за твоей продажной глупости, Анна-Лена Бербок, Берлин будет гореть.
Надо как-то сделать так, чтобы американские солдаты начали гибнуть.
Да мы сотрем в порошок Варшаву и Вильнюс.
Почему мы признаем Францию в ее границах?
Как я хочу посмотреть, чтобы Урсулиха фон дер Ляля корчилась с куском беспилотника в глотке.
Когда на сегодняшний день мы говорим, что война будет безъядерной, мы, наверное, лукавим.
По количеству на душу населения, правда, Канада ее опережает, но Америка – это мировая держава победила.
Я сейчас требую спалить Берлин.
Welcome to another episode of Russian Hate Speech, where we break down the latest lies and expose the Kremlin's threats, revisionism, and information warfare against the West. This week's message was explicit. The United States and Europe are active participants in a war against Russia. The consequences, as laid out on air, include nuclear escalation, preemptive strikes on NATO capitals, and the complete abandonment of diplomacy. In recent broadcasts of Sunday evening with Vladimir Solovyov, the Kremlin's propagandists shifted the rhetoric from confrontation to total war.
Since the very beginning of this invasion, I've said how the Poles behave. Together with the Americans, they are among the most terrifying murderers, essentially carrying out massacres of civilians like the SS troops of the Third Reich.
This statement equates the US and Poland with Nazi. It's not just a slanderous comparison, it's a deliberate attempt to legitimize Russian retaliation as a form of historical justice.
After all these lies from the Europeans, why do we maintain any diplomatic relations with them? They declared war on us. As the Bible says, their blood be on their own heads.
This biblical reference is used to frame war as morally justified retribution, casting Europe as the aggressor and Russia as the avenger. On state television, top propagandist Vladimir Solovyov escalated rhetoric even further, openly accusing the United States of conducting direct military operations against Russia. Citing a New York Times article, he claimed that Washington is not just supplying weapons, but selecting targets for Ukrainian strikes.
The New York Times article showed that America is waging war on us. Ukrainians didn't even know their targets. They were selected by Americans, with American weapons and intelligence. De facto, Biden's America declared war on us. Moreover, we understand well that the only response they were afraid of, the one I proposed, is tactical nuclear weapons. This is the only thing that held them back. The only thing. So I will say it again, we must follow the path of escalation, extremely harsh, not insane, but harsh. Because the Americans have taken the escalation to an absolutely unprecedented level, one that has never existed in our history. When they de facto carried out strikes against us themselves, and the fact that we still haven't shot down or destroyed the entire American intelligence infrastructure creates in them a false sense that they are allowed to do so. When we know the surnames, first names, and positions of the generals who directly gave orders for strikes on Russian territory, then I believe the main question we must pose to official America is: hand over these war criminals to us, or put them on trial there. Otherwise, they were acting on direct orders from their commander-in-chief, which means we must regard America as a country that has declared war on us and killed our people.
This is a public argument for nuclear escalation against the United States. Solovyov positions nuclear first use not as a last resort, but as a rational, measured response. Moreover, Russian political analyst Dmitry Evstafiev promoted the narrative that the United States, under President Donald Trump, is not a neutral mediator in the war against Ukraine, but a direct participant in the conflict. This framing aims to delegitimize any future US role in peace negotiations and justify further confrontation with the West.
The United States has long crossed the line of hybrid war with Russia. It is now in a state of a direct military confrontation. The United States is, and again, I'm not making this up, it's all written down, in a state of direct military confrontation with the Russian Federation is one of the parties of the conflict. So why claim the status of a mediator? Trump cannot be a mediator between Russia and Ukraine. Trump is a participant in this conflict, on the side of the armed forces of Ukraine and the illegitimate Nazi regime in Kiev.
Another direct threat against NATO territory, this time a call for preemptive strike on military bases, defense industry facilities, including Germany's major military hubs.
The Germans say, and the Europeans too, Brussels too, that we must prepare for war by 2030. And what? Should we allow them the time to prepare? No, I think that, well, a couple more such statements and we can quite accurately strike Brussels. And at the same time, the Rammstein plant, yes, the German one, and that Rheinmetall things too, yes. Rammstein too, why get up twice? Yes, that's the Rammstein base, Rheinmetall. And what about that little town, Wiesbaden, somewhere? A preventive strike is needed. Wiesbaden, just everything. I think now, if the residents of Wiesbaden are hearing us, sell your property urgently is going to drop sharply in value. If it turns out that targeting orders for strikes deep into Russia were issued from there. In fact, war has been declared on us. We just need to call things by their names.
Solovyov responds to media coverage of his statements with a renewed threat.
Today I learned with interest that the British press is watching us, quoting me. The portrait, the main Kremlin propagandist, said, "All the British will die." Yes, you will all die, anyone who comes to our land. And the French too, you will all die. What, didn't you get it the first time? Now you think the Entente will land again like in the 20th century. Back then, almost all who landed died. Some ran away. This time, no one will leave alive. In fact, we'll come after you into your homes. You will all die. I just want the British press to quote this in full, and the French press too. If you want to leave, stay home.
In a tirade laced with insults, Solovyov denies Finland's right to criticize Russia and openly questions its right to exist.
Even the phrase, "someone expresses dissatisfaction with Great Russia," that's their problem, not ours. Even when someone like Finnish President Stubb says, Russia must agree. Agree to what? Agree to stop? Let him wrap his golf club around his neck. They've completely lost touch with reality. First, they rewrite history, invent some victory in the Soviet-Finnish war. Nice win, when you lose 11% of your territory, pay reparations, and sit quietly like a good boy. You only exist because the great Soviet Union forgave you, despite your treachery, the blockade, participation in the blockade of Leningrad, and the concentration camps. And now this scum that wasn't finished off starts making noise again. Everyone's gotten way too relaxed.
This statement openly denies Finnish sovereignty. It reframes past Soviet aggression as mercy and implies that future conquest would simply correct a historical mistake. The last but not least, on state TV, a Russian pundit claims that supporting Ukraine is a sign of Satanism and accuses entire European nations of belonging to a global godless alliance.
Ukraine, by the logic of its civilizational development, has ended up as part of a coalition that is not just godless, but essentially satanic. I mean, let's take a look. France, overt godlessness with elements of Satanism, shown at the Olympic Games. Germany, a huge number of Christian churches being demolished. Belgium, the same. The Baltic limit-trophies, there it's questionable whether religion exists at all. So in Ukraine, are there many people who realize that they are part of a global godlessness and most likely part of global Satanism? That's a very big question.
И вот это вот очень большой вопрос.
This is the narrative's spiritual layer. By branding Ukraine and its allies as satanic, the Kremlin frames the war not just as geopolitical, but as a moral and religious crusade. Thank you for watching this episode of Russian hate speech. Each of these statements is not a slip. They are part of a coordinated strategy to justify aggression, erase international norms, and prepare domestic audiences for further escalation. We'll continue to expose the Kremlin's propaganda, because silence allows it to spread. Stay informed, stay critical. We'll see you next time.